Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Donald Trump is going to run for president in 2024. I know, shocking, right? Surprise, surprise, surprise. Yes, our orange menace is back, and he's back with a vengeance. What's interesting, and I got to tell you, what's going to be fun to watch, and I was hoping this is what it was. The other part of me was hoping he was going to start his own maggot party, and that would be fun too, to watch him try and finish off what's left of the Republican Party. But it's going to be interesting watching the MAGA folks eat him, and it's going to be interesting to watch them turn on him because ahead of the big announcement today, you had one of these little planes flying around Mar-a-Lago there with a banner taunting Trump saying, "You lost again, Donald DeSantis 2024." He's going to get, and this is the weird part, he's going to get the treatment that he never really got from the left. They aren't as good at it as the right is. They aren't as mean-spirited. They aren't as committed because, most people have jobs, except these trolls, this is their job. These groups, these trolls, I don't know where the funding streams come from, but this is their thing. And it's going to be interesting to watch as the moneyed interests turn the troll machine on Trump. And will be interesting to see how he responds. Now, of course, our media fawning all over our Marmalade Mussolini. Cameras everywhere. And of course, flags everywhere and gold chairs. What's with the gold chairs? But watching the pieces align. Today, the Club for Growth released their polling information, which, again, the moneyed interests on the right, they're going to try and they're lining up behind DeSantis. They want to be done with Trump. They want to be done with the screaming. They want to be done with the noise. They want to be done with the chaos. They want all the bad policies. They want all of the horrible, the things that they could con Trump into doing by patting him on the head and saying, "Nice job, Donnie." They want all that, but they want less noise. They want less chaos. They want people to be lulled, especially the MAGA crowd. They want them to be lulled into a false sense of security that someone cares about them, even though they don't. Now, according to the Club for Growth, if you don't know, this is the billionaires' playground for politics. Pat Toomey was at one point, here the senator in Pennsylvania, the head of this organization. But in their polling memo, they point out that DeSantis leads Trump by 11 in Iowa, by 15 in New Hampshire, by 26 in Florida, and by 20 in Georgia. So it's kind of like, Donald, why are you doing this? We're crushing you. And, to be honest, I don't think he has much of a choice. But it's going to be interesting watching the Republicans go on the fringes, not the whole, because they're still afraid of the MAGA base. But going to be interesting to watch how this changes. Now, Mike Pompeo, his former Secretary of State, who is reportedly going to run for president, said we need more seriousness, we need less noise, we need steady hands. We need leaders that are looking forward, not staring in the rear view mirror claiming victimhood. That's the greatest line right there, because that pretty much sums up what the last 2 years of Trump has been. Someone staring in the rear view mirror, relitigating his loss in 2020 and focused on him being the victim. And his supporters say the same thing. You keep hearing the same messaging over and over and over. Mike Pence, however, he consulted with Mother, just so you know, and they have decided collectively that they're not going to let anyone make that decision, any decision for them. So that's good to know, right? Good to know. But it's going to get nasty because the Republican Party is now, there's a fault line. You've got the DeSantis crazy crowd and the Trump crazy crowd. And understand, working people, we're all screwed because none of them give a lick about any of us. The Republican Party still hates working people. That's the reality. It's just a matter of which figurehead is going to be leading the charge. Now, evidently, there was a lunch today in the Senate. Republican senators had a little powwow. Got pretty ugly, got pretty nasty. Mitch McConnell, Rick Scott, who wants to be Mitch McConnell, had a little to do, trying to point the finger at the other. And here's the reality. I think Mitch McConnell, as much as I dislike the man, I think he's brilliant. I think what he has been able to do to this country, if you're on that side, is remarkable. I mean, the destruction, the tearing apart of our democratic process, the stealing of a Supreme Court justice. I mean, you put that on your resume. That's like it. That's the big you-know-what moment. That's like, boom, there it is. I stole a Supreme Court justice seat. And not only did I do that, I stole hundreds of court positions. I rigged and they're angry that they claim that it's his fault. When the reality is Trump was the main part of all this. But now he's back, baby, and all the memes are flying. Yep, I'm sure they're going to have that Rambo meme again with his head screwed on there. Here's the important part. And you go, well, why would Trump be running? Why now? Why lock yourself in? Because as everyone knows, the second you declare yourself as a candidate, there's a bunch of stuff you can't do. You can't rip people off anymore. There's no more grifting. Now understand, and there's a lot of us, and I'm of the school of thought that he is concerned about Fulton County, Georgia. He is concerned that he will be indicted. You know, I was expecting today, maybe right after the announcement would have been great. But I assume very soon he's going to be indicted, or we're heading down that path. And I think he thinks so too. So this potentially, in his mind, where the hamsters are running on the wheel, this is going to protect him. And I don't know how it's going to protect him other than to give him that victim card again. Because, no one plays the victim like Don or Republicans, to be honest. They are the party of the martyr, after all. Now, the other part, and I didn't know this until I saw the article, that evidently when you start running for president, and this is weird to me, and I really do have to double check this on if it's just for president or if it's for every elected office. But evidently Facebook no longer fact checks anything you say because you're now a candidate. So this is one of those things where you go, he's full of it most of the time. Virtually every word out of his mouth is a lie, is something to be fact checked. And as someone running for president, shouldn't fact checking be part of this? And I know the argument, and I want to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Should we be fact checking the president? Is that the role of the media? Are reporters the ones who are supposed to do that? And we filter this. Should Facebook filter anything? Should they fact check anything? Personally, I'm torn, because I want to believe that people aren't going to bold-faced lie, but I know they do often, or in this guy's case, always. But I look at the reason for running, and I keep coming back to the only thing I can think of. And if you've got another idea, I want to hear it. Is this case in Fulton County? Also today, Brian Kemp testified in the Trump probe there before an Atlanta area grand jury investigating the interference in 2020. You remember? I just need to find like 12,000 votes. Raffenparcher, just go check the cushions of the couch. Just dig up those 12,000 votes I need. It's all we need. It's all we need. Just 12,000 votes. Pull them out of wherever. Reach around to the dark side of the moon and pop them out. Speaking of just popping them out, Kari Lake. Evidently, Kari Lake's not conceding. And do you know who cares less than I do? Nobody. I hope she goes away. She's not going to. She ran one of the worst campaigns, one of the meanest campaigns, brought in some of the worst people, and surprise, you lost. And what I find really interesting about all of this is I have a bunch of people who've emailed me saying, see, Democrats cheated, because one race in Arizona went to a Republican and Carrie Lake lost. And, I know a little bit about Arizona, that in Arizona, the folks there are fiercely independent. It's a huge independent voting bloc that do split their tickets. They're not a monolith. They don't go, we're going to always vote for that. Doesn't happen there often. So it's possible that one candidate could get your vote and another one could too. A Democrat and a Republican. I know it's hard to imagine that people do that. But in Arizona, I understand that is something that happens. Imagine that. But you knew what was coming. You knew the whining, the complaining. Red wine, baby. Red wine. Now, here's the thing. What we know is that the Trump candidates, they got crushed. When there was a competitive race, got crushed. I look at here in my state of Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano, crushed. And rightly so. Last I heard, it was a 15-point crushing. It's probably going to get a little worse as they continue to count the votes. That is a good thing. It's a good thing. Now, favorite story of the day. I got to get to this before we go to the phones. This is my favorite story of the day. There's going to be nothing, because this is really what Trumpism is all about. This is what the MAGA movement really is. I hope you remember America's Frontline Doctors. Remember them? They had the White Coat Summit that got Mike Pence's attention. They had the White Coat Summit, if you remember. Her name was Stella Emanuel. Stella was she believed that dream sex with demons would cause dangerous medical conditions. The demon seed. She was hysterical. But these are the doctors, the frontline doctors, who were pushing the I and the H. I'm not allowed to say the I word or the H word. Ah, hell with it. Ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. Yes, YouTube is now going to ban me for a month. But they were the ones who said, no, this is the stuff. This cures the disease. Well, turns out this group, and are you surprised? America's Frontline Doctors. Their very charismatic founder, Dr. Simone Gold, who on January 6th was in the Capitol, was sentenced to 60 days in jail, and came out to the warming arms of Louis Go-Go Gohmert as a hero. Well, turns out the hero is falling, because evidently she has been, squandering tons of the money from the America's Frontline Doctors group. And the story, wow. Wow. Can I say wow again? Because it's wow. According to the report over at Politico, over at the Daily Beast, AFLDS, America's Frontline Doctors, received at least $10 million in donations and millions more by facilitating prescriptions for the H word and the I word, hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. But Gold derailed her path to right-wing stardom when she entered the Capitol during the January 6th with John Strand, an underwear model, roughly 20 years her junior, who had become her boyfriend and an AFLDS employee. According to prosecutors, Gold stood by as a police officer was attacked by rioters, opting not to use her medical training. Now, it turns out she was spending about $50,000 a month, the boyfriend about $15,000 a month. Not only was she spending $50,000 a month on personal expenses, she was blowing about $5,600 a month on house cleaning. I guess she's a slob. Because I guess her and the boyfriend are slobs. Because $5,600 a month to clean your house, that seems a bit high. But evidently she's been diverting a bunch of funds into her own extravagant lifestyle. Bought a $3.6 million house, That people are questioning why they're in Naples, Florida, $100,000 on a single private jet trip. Yeah, squandering the money. And why? Well, because she can. Now, understand, this is set up as a nonprofit. Because people donate money to this. People, give to this because, hey, they're America's frontline doctors. They're bringing us the I and the H and all of the quackery. And she is just milking them blind. And this is really, sadly, this is the MAGA movement. And are we surprised with someone like Trump at the head? Are we surprised with a con man at the head? I'm not. Let's quick go to the phones. Got Alice on one. Alice, how are we doing today?
We're doing good. Well, maybe she can hook up with Rick Scott because we haven't heard much more about him spending that money, from the Republican side of things. Maybe they got something going on,
No, I think he's too old for her, and he's not an underwear model.
No. I meant some sort of new grift they've got going on, cryptocurrency or something.
I do not doubt it. Look, at the end of this, look, from 2015 forward, and you know this as well as anyone, 2015 forward, this was nothing in Trump's mind but a way to try and have leverage over the apprentice and to make a bunch of money. He never thought he was going to win. This was a grift, and it's been that way ever since. It was about getting people into the hotels. It was about ripping people off at every opportunity. And look at all of the other people who have done this. This has been an enormous scheme, enormous fraud scheme that, the sheep are being sheared. I mean, most of them are being skinned at this point. I'm shocked they're still around.
I know. Well, the only thing, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm just waiting for him to, do whatever it is that he's going to do and, pull his I'm better than everybody else yada thing. But
yeah, it's coming.
What I'm thinking, though, is since DeSantis fired the first shot with his little banner thing, who knows? We might find out all kind of crimes. He might start leaking stuff that, Putin gave him on the Republicans, and the Republicans, on the other hand, might start leaking things on him.
Now, this is where the fun begins, and that's what I said. It's going to be interesting to see when the trolls come out against him, how that's going to play.
Oh, it's definitely... my husband said, I told my husband, I said, I am so sick and tired of hearing about Trump. That's all we've heard since 2015.
Yep.
Is Trump, 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 Trump. And my husband said, get used to it because we're going to hear it for another 4 years. And I said, 4? He said, yeah, it'll take him 2 years to get over losing. I'm like, oh, God.
I like your husband.
Yeah, he's an okay guy. Have a good evening, Rick.
Thanks so much, Alice. Good stuff as always. No, I mean, the reality is, I predicted on Inauguration Day that this would be the most corrupt administration. This is a con man. And all along the way, this is what it's been. It's been a giant con. And there are tons of these organizations that have propped up, that have made huge amounts of money off of working people. And this is, while it's comical on one vein, it's sad on another, and it's hurtful, quite frankly, that working people can be duped like this by quacks like this who say, I'm a doctor and buy this miracle cure, and people do when all they're doing is they're selling snake oil. It's the same kind of crap they were selling 100 years ago that didn't solve any problems. But we still, the con is still the same. We still fall for it. And this is where, as a working person, I look at this and I go, at no point does he care about working people? Now, we can argue and we can have a discussion all day if Democrats are the answer. And in a lot of cases, they haven't been. But Trump is not. And today's announcement, okay, he's now running for president. Good. All right. Well, what are you going to do? What policies do you think he's going to talk about tomorrow? How is he going to make your life better tomorrow? Is he going to talk about infrastructure? Because he did for 4 years while he was president. In fact, I got tons of pictures of him, playing Infrastructure Week. My favorite is the one he's in a truck and he's all hunched over like he's driving. I mean, he can't drive a bicycle, let alone a semi, but there he is. He's having a high old time on the truck. Couldn't start a truck. And didn't do anything on infrastructure. didn't do anything to rebuild our roads or our bridges, and yet there was bipartisan support, massive support. Didn't do it. Wasn't the priority. The priority was owning the libs. And I'm sorry, if that's all you have to offer, if that's what you've got to bring to the table, as a working person, that doesn't excite me. What excites me is, how are you going to make people's lives better? How are you going to make education better? How are you going to get more access to health care? Now, I was just talking to somebody yesterday who was sharing a healthcare nightmare. And you go, how do we fix that? How do we ensure that nobody goes through what this person went through? Went to the hospital, thought they were insured. Oops. They used to be in network. They weren't in network anymore. Had the procedure, didn't know that the anesthesiologist wasn't in network. And then started seeing these massive bills, just slamming them one after another, and nothing they could do. Because our healthcare system is that badly broken. What's he going to do on that front? Oh, that's right, nothing. Because he didn't do anything for the 4 years that he was in there. Claimed repeal and replace. I still remember it. Still remember there was a replacement. There was a plan. And what was it? It was a stack of blank pages. Because there's not a plan. Pay or die is not a plan. I'm sorry. I know that's the Republican health care plan, but that's not a plan. And this is where, again, we as working people have to demand better. For instance, today, you want to talk about infrastructure? Today, it's 1 year ago today that President Biden signed the bipartisan infrastructure law into place, and it was barely bipartisan. I hate that they keep framing it like that. It was barely bipartisan. But there's been over $185 billion spent, nearly 7,000 projects started in 4,000 communities across all of our states. Things are happening. Things are getting done. Do we hear Biden every day tooting his horn, saying, look at me, look how much I've done? You know, if Trump had done half of this, we'd still be hearing about it. Had he done anything positive, we'd be hearing about it. All we keep hearing about, back to Pompeo, is Trump relitigating his loss. Because it's always about him. It's always about his ego. It's always about his personal legacy. It's never about you. And this is where I'm hoping working class people start to go, when is it about us? When do we get what we need? Because understand, I go back to my 8th grade government teacher. Government decides who gets what. And right now, the wealthy in corporate America have been getting well more than they want or need or even deserve, for that matter. And working people, well, they've been getting something all right. They've been getting the shaft. They've been working longer and harder, earning less and less, and their kids having less opportunities. But we can change that. And this is where, again, policy matters. The people you vote for matter. And someone like Trump, show me the policies. Bring me the policies. What are you going to do other than whine and complain? I've seen this. I've seen this movie. It was bad the first 2 times. It's not going to be bad. It's not going to be any better now. Want to hear your thoughts, though? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Scott Paul is going to be here from the Alliance for American Manufacturing to share some thoughts on Infrastructure Day, 1 year past, and also what's going on with China. Right back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 2014. That was the day 4 workers were killed and a 5th injured during a chemical leak at a DuPont insecticide plant near Houston, Texas. The plant used methyl mercaptan in its production of insecticides. 24,000 pounds of the deadly chemical were released through 2 valves in a poorly ventilated building on site. The U.S. Chemical Safety Board found numerous flawed safety procedures, design problems, and inadequate planning. Days earlier, liquid methyl mercaptan had solidified in piping, causing a blockage. Workers attempted to clear it by spraying the pipes with hot water. They didn't realize they had cleared the blockage, which then created a high-pressure buildup of the chemical in other piping. When 2 workers went to drain those pipes in a routine procedure, they were overcome by toxic vapors. Another 2 workers answering the subsequent distress call were also killed. DuPont blamed the workers for the release of the toxic gas, but the CSB found a number of violations. The building where the release occurred had an inadequate toxic gas detection system. Ventilation fans were not working, and the workers were not required to wear additional breathing protection for tasks they performed there. Line clearing procedures were faulty, routinely exposing workers to toxic fumes. The board also found that DuPont worked to conceal from environmental regulators as many as 4 releases of methyl mercaptan 2 days before workers were killed. The CSB asserted that design flaws prompted months of clogs before the deadly incident. More generally, they noted that the design of the building that housed the pesticide unit inherently increased the threat of exposure to workers and the public. DuPont opted to close the plant in 2016 rather than meet recommendations of federal regulators.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
America's political, corporate, and media establishments were cocksure about their prognostications that a powerful red wave was about to hit America in this month's elections. It would sweep Democrats out and push Republicans into office all across America, they exclaimed. How shocking and embarrassing, then, that their raging wave turned out to be just a little ripple. Republicans ran poorly and many Democrats ran well. Still, the Democratic Party as a whole should have done better if its Don't Rock the Boat leadership had been gutsier, more progressive, and, yes, more democratic. Well, murmur the party's Washington hierarchy, we can't get too far ahead of the people. Really? Why not ask the people themselves? That's the virtue of the ballot initiative system. It allows grassroots groups to put issues up for a vote, rather than letting the public agenda be controlled by a clique of lobbyists, legislators, and party line followers. This year, there were 132 of these initiatives on the ballots in 37 states, and more on local ballots. And vote after vote showed that the people are way ahead of the political insiders in support of strong progressive policies. By big margins, 3 states said to hell with a Republican Supreme Court enshrining women's abortion rights in their state constitutions. South Dakota, supposedly a right-wing bastion, shoved their GOP governor and legislators aside to expand Medicaid health coverage to the state's low-income families. In bright red Nebraska, nearly 60% of voters said yes to a $15 minimum wage. A big majority in Illinois amended the state constitution to guarantee collective bargaining rights for workers. 70% of New Mexico voters made funding of early childhood education a constitutional requirement. This is Jim Hightower saying, for more information, go to ballotpedia.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, a year ago this day, President Biden signed the infrastructure law into place. And yeah, we're actually rebuilding stuff. In fact, do you know how I know we're rebuilding stuff? Because I spend a lot of time in traffic. I was just going through my little town here. It seems like every single road is shut down all at the same time. And I don't know why. Oh, yeah, I do. President Biden signed the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which has put money into the states like Pennsylvania, almost $6 billion into this state to help rebuild our roads, our bridges, our broadband, all of our infrastructure. That's getting stuff. And here's the part that bothers me. No giant Joe Biden sign saying, I did that. I want that. I get it. Don't waste the money. Don't spend the money. Use it on roads and bridges, but I still want the sign. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the 1-year anniversary. I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. AmericanManufacturing.org is their website. Check that out. We'll get links on social media. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick. Great to be with you.
So a year ago on this very day, Sleepy Joe put his signature on the paper that got us roads and bridges, the biggest investment since Eisenhower on the roads and bridges front. For somebody who doesn't do much, he seems to do a lot.
Yeah, he does. And it's kind of emblematic of some of the major accomplishments of this administration. They're going to have durable impacts for people all over the country. right? I mean, that will last for generations. Even though, you know, I don't know how many people are going to, you know, get out and vote and say, I'm an infrastructure voter, right? It's not like the top of mind issue for a lot of folks. And a lot of folks don't even remember it got done or think it got done. But I think, to your point, Rick, the physical reminder of it, or when you're logging on from anywhere and you have fast broadband, or you can depend on clean water, or the airport terminal looks like it got an upgrade, or there's mass transit in your community, or electric buses running through smaller communities as well. That's all going to be the progress that was brought about through this infrastructure bill. And I think the great thing about this, and I'm just going to inject a little bit of politics here, is that I think very little of that probably showed up, maybe a little bit, but very little of it probably showed up at the ballot box this November. But in 2 years, there's going to be a lot more that's done. There's going to be a lot more to showcase. Both the infrastructure projects that are complete, or the factories that have been stood up as a result of all this stuff. So there's going to be an extraordinary record of accomplishment. And let's remember this too. This was a bipartisan piece of legislation. I mean, there weren't a lot of Republicans who supported it, but there were some, and there were enough who supported it to make a difference there. And so I think that it was a signature accomplishment, and again, something that is going to have a durable impact for a lot of generations in the United States of America. Brought to you by Joe Biden in a very understated way.
Yeah, my mind is now spinning in ways, because originally I said, just a big giant 15-foot cardboard cutout with, like the thing they were slapping on the gas pumps. Biden did this. Saying hey, I did this. But I'm now thinking on the broadband thing. You remember AOL, and you had that noise that when you got the dial-up, you have a little noise going. Joe Biden did this.
Yeah.
Kind of. I don't know. Maybe that's a bridge too far. But
5G brought to you by Joe Biden.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Or just call it, Biden, Biden or something.
Yeah, Biden. Yeah, why not?
No, but I mean, look, at the end of the day, we spent 4 years under the last guy talking about infrastructure. Yeah. And the guy who can barely get a sentence out got it for us. This is, to me, the important part. I don't care what your words are. I don't care if you can deliver the line or not. Get it done. And that's what this administration has been. They've been getting stuff done. And to me, that's all I want. How are you making our lives better?
Yeah, workhorses, not show horses. I think that's absolutely right. And in addition to infrastructure, you had the CHIPS Act for semiconductor factories. You have the clean energy manufacturing. And the reason why I'm raising this up is that, I mean, together this represents basically almost a couple $1 trillion in investment, pretty close to it. But the bigger reason I'm mentioning it is that you're going to see the fruits of this labor in 2023, in 2024. There's going to be, you're seeing tech layoffs at Meta and Twitter and all these places, but you're seeing hiring in virtually every factory in the United States of America right now. And that has a much more granular impact for people who live in a lot of those small and mid-sized towns, Rick, that I know you rolled through over the last month. I mean, they're going to see that. And when people feel better, they make smarter decisions at the voting booth as well. There's not as much scapegoating or finger pointing, and so and it's harder to inject some of those cultural issues into the mix. They can try, the other side, but it's not going to be as effective. So I think I'm excited about what lies ahead here.
Yeah, no, and look, when we went through Ohio, we had a conversation with Tim Ryan, and I think Tim Ryan ran what was a fantastic campaign. Yeah. If Ohio wasn't such a badly gerrymandered, badly rigged state, I think he would have done better. But the sad reality is, he didn't. But I think he ran the right campaign on the right issues, talking about the future of this country in ways that most Democrats and Republicans don't.
Yeah, you're right, and he's one example of a candidate who went to talk to people who were forgotten. by both parties, and unfortunately had been forgotten by a lot of national Democrats. Not Joe Biden, but a lot of national Democrats before them, and that's why he made it as close as he did,
Yep.
right? Against extraordinary odds. And then there are great examples of other candidates. I mean, I know that you talked with Marcy Kaptur in an unfavorable district now. Who appeals to working class voters, John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. But unless you reach out and you do the hard work of going out into these communities, you're not going to get it done. And I know I'm going to pull out an example from my own experience from 30 years ago. And believe me, a lot has changed in politics over the last 30 years. But I ran for the state legislature in rural Indiana as a progressive Democrat, and I knocked on a lot of doors in towns that were overwhelmingly Republican. I made a close race because of that, because I want to talk to the people. And if you don't engage and you don't reach out and you don't go to these small communities and try to talk to them about their concerns, then you don't have a shot.
Yep.
And that's why Ryan got as close as he did. That's why Fetterman won, and that's clearly one of the things that gave Biden a bit of a leg up in 2020. And so my hope is that the takeaway, at least for the Democratic Party from this election, is that, look, run on your accomplishments, but go out and talk to working class voters, go to small communities, and you're not going to win all of them over. You might not even win half of them over, but you're going to win enough of them over that it's going to make a difference.
No, that was the point of our Working Class Heroes tour. We specifically chose more rural communities, places that had been described as used to be's. This used to be the place where we made this. This used to be the place where we made that. And we went into those places that have been abandoned by virtually everybody. And they just want to work again. They want their identity back. And as I said during the tour, they believed Trump was going to be that guy. He wasn't, and he's not going to be. He's not the future. What Biden is doing is the right thing, and it's moving us in that direction. And this to me is the important moment that we take this and we move that forward, because look, we went into some places where there used to be a factory and now the biggest employer is a drug treatment facility.
Right.
There's a serious problem in rural America, and we've got to talk to them. And the one thing that I did find out, and I think you will probably agree with this from 30 years ago, progressive policies are extraordinarily popular.
Yeah.
Progressives are not, because they've been attacked by right-wing talk radio. That's the difference here. They've demonized the politicians, but the policies are popular.
That's right. Child care tax credit, obviously drug rehabilitation, Medicare for all. I think these are things that are critically important to communities like that. In addition to the investment in our future, that investment in infrastructure or in manufacturing or in technical education. And so that is, I think you're absolutely right that if you have, if you look at the policies, it's not an extreme agenda. It's actually a very mainstream agenda. And when I see groups like the Third Way or others saying that the reason why Democrats are losing is because they've gone away too much from the middle. The evidence just doesn't support that this time. The folks who lost were in the New Democratic Coalition.
Yep.
The folks that won in the swing districts were the ones that had bold policies, and the folks who either scored upsets or who made it really damn close followed the same path.
People were going to make your life better. At the end of the day,
right.
People want somebody who's going to fight to make their lives better. It's that simple. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Scott Paul. Scott's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, the website. Check that out. We'll get links out on social media. Now, Scott, I want to change gears quick because, the big news today for me anyway is, Biden met with Xi. There seems to be, the reporting coming out is a cooling down of temperature a bit, because yesterday on the show we talked about the potential of of having to arm Taiwan and China possibly taking over Taiwan and all that kind of chaos. Am I reading too much into today? And I wanted to get your thoughts on the meeting that happened.
Look, we'll see what happens, and it's there's a long history that Biden has with Xi. I mean, they've been meeting with each other for more than a dozen years, and so there's a fair amount of familiarity there, and it's always good to reestablish that top level connection. I think that the important thing from my takeaway from all of this is that it's unsurprising that both countries said, look, we're going to look out for our own interests. I think one of the takeaways, though, is that there'll be a little more certainty and transparency about the approach there, so that a lot of businesses or competitors won't get caught off guard by a lot of this. But I fully anticipate this administration and this Congress to impose even more measures designed to restrict the ability of the Chinese Communist Party to bully us economically or geopolitically, and also to bolster our own efforts to build up our own capabilities here. And I really don't see us backing off from that right now. And as the trade ambassador Catherine Tai said, after the Xi Biden meeting about the tariffs that are currently on Chinese products, she said, look, the underlying reason why those tariffs are there still exist in China. Nothing has changed, right. And so there's no reason to remove them.
I gotta tell you, I like her a lot.
Until there's a change, and all these businesses are like, please remove the tariffs, and she's like, no, we're not. That's not something we're going to do. And so I do think that again, having those conversations are important, and that it could, Rick, as you kind of laid out, it could avoid a shooting war. It could avoid escalation. But I don't think that that Biden, that this administration or this Congress or the new Congress are going to back off tough measures designed to constrain some of the ambitions of the Chinese Communist Party that have spillover effects. Look, if a country wants to grow and prosper, that's great. Let them do that. But if they're going to do that at our expense, using kind of discriminatory policies that are going to harm jobs, then we need to stand up, push back, or they're going to harm our security too. We need to stand up, push back against that. And so I fully continue to expect the U.S. to do that.
No, this is where I come back to. I was happy to see the president took a strong stance, and also said, look, we're not going to meddle in your thing, but we're moving forward. And for us as a country, this is where I think we've got to be demanding reshoring manufacturing, start domestic production for domestic consumption. And I've been saying this for years. You've been on the show for years, and you've heard me say that 1,000 times. And I'm never going to walk away from that. I've never been a free trader. I've been a fair trader. This is one of those moments where I'm hoping that the rest of us are going, maybe we do need to control our own supply chain. Maybe we do need to have strong, robust manufacturing, and we move on that.
Yeah. And Rick, this is across the board. I mean, one of the reasons why that semiconductor legislation got done is because consumers of semiconductors happen to be big, wealthy corporations who said, look, we can't operate without these semiconductors. We need to make more of them in the United States. And so that's how that policy got done. There are a lot of other places where this is also true. And it ranges from our military. I think we've discovered that we can't resupply a lot of the weapons that we've been providing to Ukraine, or that we'd need, God forbid, if there was an escalation with respect to Taiwan.
Stop and think about this for a second. Stop and think about this for a second. We end up, and this is not funny. I mean, it's really not. But let's say something did blow up in Taiwan, and we didn't have the parts we needed to give them, the Taiwanese, the things that we promised them, because we need the parts from China. And we asked China, can you give us the parts that we need for the weapons that we need to give to the Taiwanese to fight you?
Yeah.
Does that make any sense on any level whatsoever?
Yeah, precisely. That's exactly right. What is that is right. Yeah, that is completely logical. I mean, that's like one of those logic puzzles that you figure out in like junior high that our policymakers never figured out. But I think the biggest difference now is that we've seen this actualized, right? We've seen that. Our Stinger missile production or whatever, it's hard to resupply with our capabilities. We've seen others in the military raise alarm bells about this. And, this applies to stuff that we use every day, too, or that we need in the pandemic. I mean, this is not just a one-off. This is like very, very broad-based here.
So really quick, because I've got a couple more minutes left. I seem to remember there was this amendment that was supposed to not let us get into this situation. The Berry Amendment. How did we not? It's supposed to be for the military, because we're a war society. We want to make sure that our military gets what it needs, and I'm on board with that 100%. How did we go from having control of our own military and our own supply chain for our military to this? How did we allow that to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And we could talk. I'll summarize it in 30 seconds for you, Rick, because there's a really long answer to this. But the quick one is that there was an effort to cut costs and to use more commercially available stuff deep into the supply chain. That inevitably led to sourcing the stuff from overseas, right? At the same time, we also wanted to share some of the wealth with our allies and spread around defense production with our allies. And I'm not opposed to some of that, but I think that for really critical stuff, we got to control our own destiny here. Yeah. And so it all got out of hand is the problem. And we got, this is a wake-up call. And again, I think this will be an area of focus where you're going to see Democrats and Republicans agree that we need to take action. Not only from a military perspective, but also from a lot of the critical technologies or the medical products that we need for our own health, economic, and national security in this country.
No, I mean, this is where you and I may disagree a little bit. I don't think on the military front, I'm sorry, ally or no ally, because there may be a day down the road where we're not allies. I just don't see that you.
That's fair. Yeah.
I don't get it. That makes no sense. But again, the brain trust decided, and I would argue the corporate brain trust, all because they could make more money, are the reason that we ended up in this situation. But it's time, and I'm glad we've got an administration right now moving us in a direction that we get away from some of that. But Scott, I appreciate the time as always. Great stuff, my friend.
Of course, Rick. It's so great to be with you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, our good friend Scott Paul. Make sure you check out their website, allianceforamericanmanufacturing.org. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day that federal agents stormed the offices of the industrial workers of the world in New York City. They were looking for evidence connecting the organization to radical communists or anarchists. The ransacked office was part of the infamous Palmer raids, when Attorney General Alexander Palmer responded to the growing Red Scare hysteria by raiding the office
offices of leftist organizations and arresting thousands. Hundreds of immigrants to the United States were deported during the raids without legal due process. The 1917 Russian Revolution had stoked fears about a spreading communist threat. Newspaper headlines helped to drum up public panic. A week before the IWW raid, a headline on the front page of the Evening World, published in New York City, declared, "Reds in U.S. plotted revolution, deportation for all radicals." The day after the IWW raid, a Washington Post headline read, "Law to crush Reds." Writing in 1920, Attorney General Palmer warned, quote, "The chief appeal communism makes is to the worker. If they can lure the wage earner to join their own gang of thieves, if they can show him that he will be rich if he steals, so far they have succeeded in betraying him to their own criminal course." Palmer went on to describe how communists had, quote, "stirred discontent, caused irritating strikes, and infected our social ideas with the disease of their own minds and their unclean morals." Palmer's references to workers and irritating strikes demonstrate that he perceived the labor movement as part of the communist threat. Anti-communist hysteria took its toll on the most radical elements of the U.S. labor movement, especially the IWW.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Still trying to figure out how our military ended up getting, in the position that it's in, where, we end up needing critical things from other countries. And look, there were years ago I had talked about there was a factory, the factory that made the magnets that made our smart bomb smart, that that go into the tip and for the GPS and all that. And it was I don't know all the science. It was the magnet. It was the thing that they made. And the factory was basically boxed up by the workers. They had to box up all of the machinery, and it was shipped to China and recreated in its exact form there. And I remember the story. It's one of those things that has stuck with me over the years, because it was one of those Bain Capital things and all of that. But I remember having one of the workers on, and they were talking about, the indignity of having to pack up the machinery that they used to feed their families. The machinery that they made a product that they were proud of, that to help protect the nation. And, they bought in, it was part of who they were. They internalized that product, they believed, kept us safe, and, all of that stuff. Whether you believe that or not, and I don't want to get into the whole war argument, but, these workers internalized that. They believed they were doing something for the good of the country, and it was also benefiting them, and they were helping support their communities and helping their families and all of that. And it was ripped away from them. And why? Well, why a lot of that stuff happened. Greed. Bain Capital would get involved in something that was, the hell with the workers. We'll shut this down in a heartbeat if we could make a nickel more. And they did. And a lot of these private equity funds and these hedge funds and these big money groups, it's about the bottom line. They don't care about people. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. And this is the problem with our politics. This is the problem with the era that we're in. And I'll tell you, I wish we could go backward and make it about the right things again. I'm a believer in competition, but competing on the right things. I don't know. I don't know if we're going to get there. Maybe at some point. But it's angering to see where we are. All why? So that someone could make just a little bit more for themselves at the expense of the entire community. And I know that sounds like you're a socialist, Rick. Caring about the community over the individual. How dare you? Yeah, I do. Care about the whole. That sounds wrong. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
We're racing forward to do our part to avert the climate hell that the UN Secretary General so passionately warned about earlier this week.
President Biden pledges U.S. leadership and funding at UN Climate Summit. U.S. and China resume formal climate negotiations. Plus,
that result means Democrats would once again control the Senate.
Democrats hold on to thin Senate majority, holding line on U.S. climate policy.
All of those thin majorities and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
And let me tell you this even. If we was ready for the green agenda, I'd raise my hand right now, but we're not ready right now. We're not prepared. We're not ready right now. What we need to do is keep having those gas guzzling cars.
Ladies and gentlemen, Georgia's Republican U.S. Senate candidate, Herschel Walker. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, the election that continues to inform our outlook on the climate. But first, we're stuck dealing with what happened in Florida.
Yes, we are. Hurricane Nicole caused an estimated $5 to $7 billion in damages after it slammed into Florida last week as a rare November hurricane, destroying roads, bridges, and dozens of beachfront buildings. That's according to AccuWeather.
So another billion-dollar-plus storm as these things continue to pile up in recent years.
Yes, they do. In other news, as we go to air, Democrats have retained their razor-thin majority in the U.S. Senate, but control of the U.S. House is likely to narrowly go to Republicans. Congress matters because it will determine where and how quickly funding is deployed for climate and clean energy projects under President Biden's landmark climate law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and whether the U.S. will follow through on funding commitments to help developing nations adapt to the climate crisis. President Biden spoke at the United Nations Climate Summit, COP27, in Egypt on Friday, announcing that thanks to Democrats passing the Inflation Reduction Act, the U.S. is now on track to meet its pledge under the Paris Climate Agreement to cut its emissions 43% by 2030. Biden apologized for the U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Agreement during the Trump administration.
Good. He should.
And he urged major emitters that are responsible for man-made global warming, like the U.S., to move faster to cut greenhouse gas emissions to prevent overshooting 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming to avoid catastrophic impacts.
If we're going to win this fight, every major emitter nation needs to align with the 1.5 degrees. We can no longer plead ignorance to the consequences of our actions or continue to repeat our mistakes. Everyone has to keep accelerating efforts throughout this decisive decade.
Yes, we do. Of course, beginning with us, but hopefully what we're doing and that $400 billion we've allocated under the new bill, is that encouraging the rest of the world to do the same?
It does seem to be helping. COP27 this year is focused on international climate finance under the Paris Agreement. That is getting rich nations that are primarily responsible for the crisis to boost funding to help poorer countries adapt to climate impacts and avoid becoming dependent on fossil fuels. After decades of resistance, there is some progress. Denmark pledged $500 million to finance adaptation in Namibia. Europe, the U.S., and Japan announced $20 billion to help Indonesia ditch coal. Overall, the U.S., UK, Canada, and Australia are laggards on climate finance. Biden pledged that the U.S. will quadruple funding to help other nations fight climate change, increasing U.S. contributions to a climate resilience fund to $100 million plus $150 million in new funding for adaptation and resilience projects in Africa. However, Congress must approve any new U.S. funding.
Exactly. The new Congress can stop all of that. Plus, President DeSantis can just call it all off.
The U.S. also proposed launching an international carbon credit trading system, which would allow corporations to pay someone else to cut emissions. That would raise revenue for developing nations, but it was criticized as a way for rich countries to avoid taking responsibility for causing the climate crisis. And it matters because a new analysis from the Global Carbon Budget concludes that at current emissions rates, nations will likely burn through their remaining carbon budget in 9 years, causing the world to blow past that critical 1.5 degrees Celsius target under the Paris Agreement. Finally, some good news.
Thank you.
Biden's diplomacy blitz appears to be working. On Monday at the G20 meeting, the White House announced that the U.S. and China, the world's two biggest greenhouse gas emitters, will resume formal climate negotiations, which experts called a significant development, opening up a pathway for greater emissions cuts.
So the U.S. and China are talking again about climate. There's that. For much more on all of those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said earlier, evidently today in the Senate little lunchroom, they had a little I seriously don't think it came to fisticuffs, but there was some verbal barbing between Rick Scott and Mitch McConnell. And understand, Rick Scott wants to be the guy now. They want to overthrow the king, and they're coming for him. It will be interesting to see how this plays out. Also, as I said earlier, Kevin McCarthy, over a hurdle, got the majority of votes. We'll see if he gets to 218 in January to actually be speaker, and I wish him well. I want this for him. It's one of those be careful what you wish for kind of things. But here to share some thoughts on last Tuesday's results and also where we go from here. I've asked Navin Nayak to come talk with us. Navin's the president and executive director of the Center for American Progress Action Fund. You can check out their website, americanprogressaction.org. Navin, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on.
So let's start with last Tuesday. Initial thoughts?
I mean, the analogy I use, to be totally honest, is the dam didn't break. The election deniers and the extremists were banging down at it, and history would have suggested that this thing would have caved in, and they would have run amok, controlling Congress, controlling state legislatures, and that didn't happen. And it's just worth for your listeners to appreciate that in really 100 years, an unpopular first-term president has never had this kind of an election, where right now Democrats have a net seat they've picked up in the Senate. They have netted 2 governor seats. They have flipped 4 state legislatures. They haven't lost a single state legislature. So that, it's not the resounding rejection. I wish Democrats had picked up a lot more seats in the Senate and be making progress, obviously, from my perspective. But we can't lose sight of the fact that from a historical perspective, this was unlike any other midterm. And the reason is people are really attuned to sort of MAGA extremism and rejected it.
No, this is I had a bunch of people say, well, this wasn't a landslide. I go, in terms of the situation that we're in, it kind of was, because everyone was saying there's a red wave coming, and historically speaking, should have been. And it's interesting to watch the Rick Scotts and the Mitch McConnells go after each other, and the DeSantises and the Trumps. And it's interesting to watch the Republican Party now, turning inward and eating each other over their failures.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of them thought there was that they're going to walk into taking over everything, legislatures, Congress, supermajorities in Wisconsin and North Carolina, and all of that not only failed to come, but it was pretty heartening that it also happened at really high turnout levels. Looks like we're going to basically hit, the second highest midterm turnout we've ever had, 2018 being the other one. And that's a good thing for our democracy, to be vibrant and engaged at levels that, we haven't really seen in a long time. In terms of the Republican infighting, obviously they've got a lot of soul searching to do. They failed to do what basically every other party out of power does. I mean, there really isn't something easier in American politics, in D.C. especially, than being the party out of power. You basically sit there, you criticize the other party, and listen, the other party's got some real headwinds, right? Democrats are facing, it's a global problem, but we've got inflation over 8%. The president's not very popular. Crime has been, for the last 2 years, starting under Donald Trump, been high. There are real problems facing the country. You would think that Republicans could have sit back and just made that the story.
Yeah.
But they were the story this year. And this, unlike any other midterm, this was a choice. And holy cow, that if you can't win when you're the party out of power, I think that raises some should raise some real alarm bells for Republicans.
Well, I think it was kind of a perfect storm for Democrats, to be honest. You had you had the Roe decision, and I know a lot of women were telling me leading up to the election it was going to be Roe-vember, and it turned out to be. You had a lot of really, really crazy, off the fringe, off the rails candidates, like Doug Mastriano here in my state of Pennsylvania, like that Kerry Lake out in Arizona. You had some real, you had insurrectionists running for office. So that played. You had young people who were fearing democracy wasn't going to be there. The climate issue. There was so much converging on this cycle that it's not surprising, but it's still important that it did happen the way it did. And I just wish it was a little bit more, so that Democrats would have kept control, that we'd get something done the next 2 years. Because I fear it's just going to be a giant, S show the next 2 years of Republicans being who they are right now.
Well, I mean, listen, like I said, we kept MAGA extremism at bay. It did not go away, right? Like that movement, that threat to our country is still, unfortunately, thriving in a lot of parts of this country. And I think it'll actually be helpful for the American people. Not my preference, but I think it will be helpful for the American people to actually see them govern in full display again. I mean, this is, they were struggling years ago under Donald Trump, but I think they've become even more extreme and even more radicalized. And I think watching them for the next 2 years, right? Like I said, they lost this election when they weren't in power, when people didn't actually have to deal with them governing every single day. And I think Democrats have to focus on actually implementing the unbelievable, particularly economic agenda that they passed. There's a lot of work to be done, and it's important work, not only politically, but we're actually making, investments that were long overdue in manufacturing, in rebuilding our communities that have been left behind. That is, like, not only do the dollars have to go out the door, but there's a story that Democrats have to go tell. I mean, the fact that Democrats did this well and most people didn't know they passed the Inflation Reduction Act, or that they'd made the largest investment in infrastructure in 50 years, goes to show that there's even more room to actually fix some of the story.
So is this because I don't think Democrats did a good job at all in telling that story at all over these last 2 years. I mean, Donald Trump ran the country for 4 years, talking about infrastructure, talking about, reshoring manufacturing and creating jobs and doing all this stuff. Now, he talked a great game. As a con man, as a snake oil salesman, as a pitch man, he was fabulous. Didn't get any of it done. Now, the guy who, doesn't really speak well, he's getting it done. Is that the job of the Democrats the next 2 years, to get out there into the communities and say, look what we've done, and start taking credit for some things, start tooting their own horn, maybe get those giant 15-foot signs that I've been saying we need that said Joe Biden did this? Is that where we go?
We got to tell the story. Like we have just made the most transformative investments in rebuilding this economy in a generation. And it's 3 different bills. We have to get away from talking about these bills, but just for your listeners, it is the infrastructure bill that was passed actually a year ago today, and makes the largest investment in infrastructure since Eisenhower built the highway system. It's a bill called the CHIPS and Science Act, which will be a huge investment in manufacturing and bringing back some of the semiconductor industry that the U.S. invented, but that got shipped overseas. And it's the Inflation Reduction Act, which huge investments in clean energy and all kinds of new technologies that are going to sort of move us into the future. And these are not coastal investments. These are going to be investments in middle America, investments in small towns that have been left behind. And the money's just started to go out the door, as I said, over the last year. Not only will those resources start to get out into the community, the more important part you kind of hit on is we got to tell the story. We got to go out there and tell people the kind of economy we're trying to build that actually reinvests in workers and in working people and creates good jobs that offer dignity. And that's what the Biden economy was in the first 2 years. And now we've got to go create that story. And I would push for Democrats to be telling that story in their communities, in their states all day long for the next 2 years, and I don't want to say circus, because the circus is entertaining and I worry it's going to be scary, but let Republicans do what they're going to do in Washington.
Yeah, and we know what they're going to do. We have an idea of where that's going. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show with Navin Nayak. Navin's president and executive director of the Center for American Progress Action Fund. You can check out their website, americanprogressaction.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can check the work out that they do. All good stuff. But I got a question for you, because, you know, I know my conservative listeners are going to go, so what you're saying is Joe Biden's buying votes by buying all this, spending all this money on things we don't need, like more windmills. Interestingly enough, going through Iowa this past month, I have never seen so many windmills in my entire life as I saw in Iowa. Green energy seems to be alive and well in Iowa, and yet you talk to people on the street there, not big fans of the Green New Deal because they don't know what it is.
Yeah, I think that's, I think we actually need more than just politicians out there telling this story. We need steel workers out there talking about it. Like those huge turbines. If we do this right, they get built in Pennsylvania and Ohio. Those are jobs for electricians that are good paying jobs for electricians to be wiring those windmills to make sure they produce energy. I mean, this is us again investing. It's making investments in communities, investments in people, growing our economy by actually putting workers first. And, I guarantee you that the average worker who gets a good job and is able to support a family isn't going to politicize whether the energy is clean or whether it's dirty. And I think is going to be pretty proud of the work they're doing. And I think that's the kind of opportunities that we have in front of us. I think these investments, they will reshape what America looks like, and again, make us an economic powerhouse from a manufacturing and a growth perspective. And I think we've got to tell that story.
No, absolutely. Because this is one of the things that Democrats, and I can't harp on this enough. And if I sound like a broken record, it's because I am. Democrats get rabbit ears. And I said this about the Obama ears. When he first became president, he was out after he took office, constantly giving speeches, prime time speeches, doing it enough. And Republicans were beating up, oh, you're pandering. And he stopped. He stopped talking to people because I said he got rabbit ears. I don't want Democrats to make the same mistakes. You got to get out there. You got to keep telling the story. You got to tell it. You got to tell it again. And then you got to tell it again and again and again so that they got it the first time. That's the reality.
That is the message discipline, right? The Democrats hopefully that's one of the lessons they learned from this election. We didn't, talk about extremism and the threats to democracy and our freedoms once or twice. It's been a refrain and it worked. And that's when people actually finally start to hear something. And I think we've got to go do the same thing in terms of selling our affirmative economic agenda.
Yeah. And that economic agenda, I look at Tim Ryan, who I thought ran what was a fantastic campaign. Sadly, he didn't win, but it was a huge uphill climb for him in Ohio, as rigged as that state is. I look at this and that message that he ran on, making lives better, reshoring manufacturing, smart trade, that strengthening unions, that's the message of the future.
I think it's the message of the future, but here's the thing that makes me really encouraged, Rick, is we had these three bills I mentioned. Every Democrat in Congress voted for them, from Bernie Sanders or AOC, whoever you want to put on that end of the spectrum, to Jared Golden, who's a congressman in Maine, or every single Democrat voted for this kind of investment in workers and these kinds of investment in our future, and actually trying to grow the economy by putting people back to work, building things in this country again. So yes, it's the future, but it's actually right here in front of us. We've passed it.
Yep.
And, I wish we did still have control of the House, because there's a lot more problems in this country. But now, instead of there being a whole focus on what next are Democrats going to do and people moving forward to the next fight, which is important, we have kind of a real opportunity to go and sell what Democrats have already done, and I think no one's heard about it, and that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, we got to take a message. We got to take a page out of the Trump playbook and get out there and do the PR work. And bringing up Trump, the last question I've got for you today was the big announcement. Do you care?
I did watch it. There's nothing. It's a lot of lies, as you'd expect. Less grievances than I was sort of anticipating, but I really felt like I was being gaslit, Rick. It was, this is a guy who unleashed a mob on our Capitol that led to several people dying. It was an attempt to steal our democracy from us, basically, overturn an election that was free and fair. And I don't know what else. Everything else is sort of irrelevant after that, right? This guy was involved in multiple crimes and conspiracies then to actually steal that election. And so it just strikes me as, whether he was reading from a teleprompter or not, as I heard one commentator sort of opining on, and whether, he can be that disciplined. All of it is irrelevant. I mean, we've got to keep what this guy did front and center. And here's the other thing that I think is really important. It goes a little bit to where we started with McConnell, and none of them are willing to actually deal with the problem in their party right now. I mean, Mitch McConnell and Rick Scott are not offering dramatically different. Mitch McConnell supported all these candidates. Rick Scott supported all those candidates, whether it's Kerry Lake or Doug Mastriano or, Oz. There isn't really anyone that is willing to stand up in that party other than maybe Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, who are both unfortunately leaving Congress, who are willing to say, we've got to stop these attacks on rights and freedoms. We've got to stop these attacks on democracy. They've sort of made their bed, and they are sort of reaping what they've sown.
Yeah, now you got to sleep in it. Navin, I appreciate the time. Great stuff. I look forward to having you come back again. There's a lot of messaging, a lot of. I'm hoping Democrats are listening, and I'm hoping they get out there and tell the stories. But good stuff, man.
Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Navin Nayak, he is the president and executive director there at the Center for American Progress Action Fund. Check out their website, AmericanProgressAction.org. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it looks like Kevin McCarthy defeated Andy Biggs, the Republican from Arizona, to become the, not yet, but he won 188-31, according to Punchbowl News. This is the first step to getting towards January, where he's going to need 218 votes. And I don't know how you're going to get there if you've got just 218 votes. Do you think you're going to get all of the Freedom Caucus? You're going to think you're going to get Scott, pardon me, Perry to come on board, and the Freedom Caucus and all those lunatics? And how are you going to corral the cats? How are you going to wrangle them all into line? That will be the fun to watch, because look, they've all got their own attacks. They all want to be media stars. They all want to have attention. And the sad reality is at the end of this, it's working people who are going to struggle and suffer because of it. Now, as Nevin pointed out, the Democrats, their responsibility is over these next 2 years is to point out exactly what is in the legislation that they've put forward, and they've passed, and they've signed into law. That's going to make our lives better. That's going to rebuild our infrastructure, going to make our country stronger, going to rebuild our manufacturing, get good jobs for working people. That's their job, and they're crummy at it. They really are. And our corporate-controlled mainstream media has no interest in telling those boring stories. But the fact that there's actual construction going on all over the place, and I had one of these weird conversations with a construction worker, because I'm waiting in traffic, he's out there out the window, and I go, hey, that Joe Biden, and he goes like, yeah, I go, got you a job and fixed this road, how dare he? And I don't think he quite got it right away that I was being facetious. Eventually did get it. And I've done this a couple of times to the construction folks, because we are rebuilding stuff. We are fixing stuff, and that's much, much needed. But also creating good jobs, because guess what? Those are prevailing wage jobs. And for those who don't know what prevailing wage jobs are, those are good paying jobs. That means the in places that have, and this is where this gets a little murky. In states that aren't no rights at work states, a state like Pennsylvania, for instance, a state like Illinois, where you have strong unions and strong union density, unions report their wages. And prevailing wage is the wage that's most often reported. So a prevailing wage of, for painters, if you have a strong union painter local, they're reporting the wages more often than the non-union sector. So the higher wage is going to be the prevailing wage. It's not an average, it's not a minimum, it's not a maximum, it's the one most often paid. So if you had 10 painters and 5 of them were paid $10 an hour and 3 were paid 20 and 2 were paid 10, the prevailing wage would be the one that the 5 got. That's how it works. And those are usually, especially in states that have good union density, those are good paying jobs. Those are good wage jobs. And it pulls up the workers in the non-union sector as much as it supports the workers in the union sector. And it's good for the local economy. And there have been studies on this, and I'm not going to bore you with all the numbers and all the stuff there, but the reverberation effect of prevailing wage in communities is enormous. Small businesses make out enormously well, even big businesses. But you get quality work because you get quality craftspeople doing those jobs. In states that have done away with their prevailing wage, we know what happens. They lose their local craftsmen. You end up with transient labor coming through who are just trying to slap something together to get onto the next job so that they can cash in. Race to the bottom always comes with working people getting screwed. This is another one of these moments where the Biden administration ensured the prevailing wage was in all of this stuff to make sure that we get good quality stuff. We get good roads and bridges. We get it done on time, on budget, with quality workmanship, and by local people. I say this all the time. When they put a roof on the school where my kids go, I wanted those to be local people. I wanted their kids to sit in the classroom right next to mine, so they did the best job possible. That's what we should be demanding. That's what we should be wanting. And I keep saying, thank goodness the Biden administration gets this. Thank goodness they have figured this out. Now, we're going to hear a lot from the right, a lot of whining and complaining, a lot of screaming and hollering. There's going to be a lot of chaos over the next 2 years, and we've got to block out that noise. Sure, the entertainment, that's going to be one thing. But we've got to stick to what makes people's lives better. Does the show of Marjorie Trainwreck Green and Lauren Gun Fetish Barbie, does that make our lives better? No. This legislation, that does. The jobs, that's going to. Good stuff going to happen over the next 2 years. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1881. That was the day that trade unionists held the founding convention of the Federation of Trades and Labor Unions in Pittsburgh. This group later changed its name to the American Federation of Labor. During the 1880s, it grew to replace the Knights of Labor as the most powerful labor union organization in the United States. The Federation of Trades and Labor Unions, and later the American Federation of Labor, were dedicated to the principles of craft unionism. Unions were organized by crafts, so workers with different jobs at the same workplace would belong to different unions. The Federation of Trades and Labor Unions focused on gaining collective bargaining rights, and with it, better wages, benefits, and working conditions for its members. The creation of this federation marked a turning point in workers' struggles to improve their working conditions. However, not all workers or labor leaders were supportive of the idea of craft unionism. For example, Eugene V. Debs started the American Railway Union because he did not think the specific craft railway unions were an effective way to build worker solidarity in the industry. He wanted a union of all railroad workers, as opposed to unions divided by job description. Nevertheless, the Federation of Trades and Labor Unions and the American Federation of Labor showed that workers could band together. By doing so, they could fight for a better standard of living and a better future for themselves and their families. The Federation of Trades and Labor Unions proclaimed that their goal was to organize a systematic agitation to propagate trades unions principles, to elevate trades unionism, and to obtain for the working classes that respect for their rights and that reward for their services to which they are justly entitled. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
America's political, corporate, and media establishments were cocksure about their prognostications that a powerful red wave was about to hit America in this month's elections. It would sweep Democrats out and push Republicans into office all across America, they exclaimed. How shocking and embarrassing, then, that their raging wave turned out to be just a little ripple. Republicans ran poorly and many Democrats ran well. Still, the Democratic Party as a whole should have done better if its Don't Rock the Boat leadership had been gutsier, more progressive, and, yes, more democratic. Well, murmur the party's Washington hierarchy, we can't get too far ahead of the people. Really? Why not ask the people themselves? That's the virtue of the ballot initiative system. It allows grassroots groups to put issues up for a vote, rather than letting the public agenda be controlled by a clique of lobbyists, legislators, and party line followers. This year, there were 132 of these initiatives on the ballots in 37 states, and more on local ballots. And vote after vote showed that the people are way ahead of the political insiders in support of strong progressive policies. By big margins, 3 states said to hell with a Republican Supreme Court enshrining women's abortion rights in their state constitutions. South Dakota, supposedly a right-wing bastion, shoved their GOP governor and legislators aside to expand Medicaid health coverage to the state's low-income families. In bright red Nebraska, nearly 60% of voters said yes to a $15 minimum wage. A big majority in Illinois amended the state constitution to guarantee collective bargaining rights for workers. 70% of New Mexico voters made funding of early childhood education a constitutional requirement. This is Jim Hightower saying, for more information, go to ballotpedia.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Ah, yes, the big announcement. And again, I really don't care what the big announcement was by Trump today. What's interesting is how the media, again, going to fawn. You know they're going to fall back into line. You know they're going to be the stenographers and lapdogs. You know they're going to continue to promote this nonsense. Golden chairs again. Can we stop with the golden? Can we stop with the golden everything? It's painted. It's not real. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, well, the coming circus. Another Trump circus. The MAGA circus And, judging from what happened in the midterms, isn't going to take. That's why I've asked our good friend Scott Dworkin to come talk with us. Scott is the co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, also host of the fabulous Dworkin Report. You can find that wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thanks for having me. Congrats to Pennsylvania. How you doing?
Yeah, congrats to Pennsylvania for not being insane. Yeah, if I could give them credit for anything, that's it. Thank you, my state, for not losing your ever-loving flippin' mind. Thank you.
Didn't choose Mastriano, the insurrectionist, over the even-keeled sort of attorney general kind of person who is poised and speaks well and like a human being and doesn't play Confederate dress-up. I think it was a wise choice.
It was a wise choice to choose the more moderate of the candidates. Yes. And look, the reality is, and since this is where you've taken us, I necessarily didn't want to be the Florida of the Northeast just with cold weather. I don't want the bad policies. I don't want to having no rights at work state. I don't want lower wages and more dangerous working conditions. I don't want even worse of an education system. I think we should. There are better paths. Better paths.
Yeah. I agree. And, Ohio campaigning did not take that same approach where they were approaching those issues in the same way. You have, our friends in Ohio who tried to focus on the economy instead of
see this is where we're going to disagree. I think Tim Ryan ran absolutely the best campaign possible. He ran the right campaign. It's what Democrats should grab their hands with both hands and run 110% on. The difference is Ohio is a rigged state in every sense of the word and gerrymandered like no other state in this country. So I'm going to go with it's a rigged state. I'm not taking any lessons from Ohio.
Understood. So some of the lessons from Ohio, I love the way that he presents himself, where you saw him do his Fox News interview, right? Or where he did the town hall debate and he faced off with the crowd. And,
Tim Ryan, right?
Yeah, and Tim Ryan. And I think that there's a way to balance it. You're right. In the Midwest, that is how it should be presented. I don't think that the social issues should go on the back burner. I think that you should be proud of where you stand and be clear about that. So, I think Pennsylvania was, there was a lot of money there. Ohio is a very rigged state. I think that some things could have been done differently, obviously.
Yeah, I don't know how you overcome the gubernatorial coattails. I don't know, a 24-point beating on the gubernatorial side.
That was bad.
I don't know how you do that. And look, the other part of this, and I had a long conversation with somebody who was telling me, Ohio is absolutely a solidly red state. I go, no, Ohio is a solidly rigged state because most people stayed home. If you already know the outcome of an election, why are you going to bother to vote? Most districts in Ohio are completely uncompetitive because of the way they've been rigged. So if you're a Democratic voter in a 60% Republican area, are you going to bother showing up? The answer is no. And that's going to trickle down to the statewide races, which is what happened here.
Yeah, it's a tough state to have grown up in.
Tell me about it.
It was a different time. It was a different time then. Cleveland Browns would win some games and not hire the wrong people. It's something that I've seen across the country. One thing that I guess I was very hopeful is traveling across the country in places like Montana, Utah, Oklahoma, Texas, Kentucky, North Carolina. Places that you may not see as much steam on the news. There's a lot of Democratic support out there. It needs to be, I guess, tethered in and united, and there has to be a way forward for 2024. But there really is that, and I think you are right. I will see that point that you are right about.
Hold on, say that again because my wife's listening.
You are right about one small thing. No, you're right about the point of how Tim Ryan ran. With his demeanor, how he acted. He didn't play games. He confronted everybody. He didn't, shy away from people who were trying to get gotcha moments, and he was able to overcome them all. And that is the way that Democrats need to be running. He did run a stellar campaign. I think he was abandoned by the party when they saw some of the polling.
So here's what I'm going to say right now. Jamie Harrison needs to get another job. Tim Ryan should be the head of the DNC.
I have no comment on that.
That's where I'm going.
I will say that Jamie Harrison has done a great job.
Go ahead. Keep going.
I think that there is always a need for potential change. I'm not sure if this is the right time to do that based off of what I've seen, because there may be leadership changes in the House here shortly, and there may be leadership changes in the Senate, not Schumer, but people may retire.
We need it. Desperately need it.
So
because
we'll
we were on the road for a month with our Working Class Heroes radio tour.
Right.
And we went into Iowa, we went into Wisconsin, we went into Michigan, we went into Ohio, we went through Pennsylvania. We went through these states, and we talked to people on the ground, and time again they came back to, it's the economy, stupid. And we didn't really need to go drive 7,000 miles to find that out, but it was nice to have people telling this repeatedly, that this is the issue. Now, you said you don't push the social issues on the back burner. I don't disagree that you keep to your core beliefs on the social issues, but that's not what you lead with. You lead with, how are we going to make people's lives better? On the social issues, it's as a matter of course, this is where we are, because of course this is the right side of history. Of course we're going to do the right thing, but we're going to help make lives better. That is the true north, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, you can do both.
Exactly.
You can do both.
You don't have to lead with it, though.
No, it doesn't have to be
candidate. Indulge me for a moment.
Knowing your audience is crucial, obviously, and so that would be a predicate as to how you're presenting yourself to everybody. But you definitely have to be aware of, there's a lot of folks who will not. What I mean is, there's a lot of folks who do not stand by what they stand for, and they'll toe around it and not actually overtly, clearly say what they stand for on those social issues, even though they know what they stand for, even though everybody knows what they stand for. And when they're asked about it, they're not saying, I stand for, I support gay marriage. I support the right for abortion. I support the right to choose. I support, X, Y, and Z. Like, they don't just proudly say it. And we've had that problem for years, and luckily we've had some candidates now that have no problem saying it, because when you lack the confidence to say it, that's when you start getting attacked for it, and you just need to stand for what you stand for. Shapiro did an excellent job of that in Pennsylvania, I think, where he was able to confront the issues, very clearly say where he stood, because in that it didn't become an issue at a constant because of it, and he was able to move on and talk about other issues because of that. How do you stand on abortion? He's like, this is how I stand. It wasn't a murky answer where he talked for 30 minutes about blah, blah, blah. He gave a straight up answer. This is where I stand. This is how I stand. And then they moved on to the next question. And I think that is the Tim Ryan approach that you're talking about, where you can confront an issue and talk about it openly and have a real conversation and remind people that this isn't a screaming match. You don't have to do that. So I think there is a mix there, and I think there is a necessity for people like that to be in leadership at the DNC, and especially with, people recognizing how online organizers are the key to the Democratic Party, making sure that they turn out voters. And I think, that's something that Jamie does thrive on. I don't know if Jamie will run again. I don't know how the DNC inner workings work. I think that Tim Ryan would be a great chair of the DNC. I know he'd do the work and whatnot, but I don't know how that works, and I don't want to start some kind of.
Yeah, you're not gonna start that. You're not gonna get involved in the bomb that I've just thrown into your lap. You're not gonna take the hand grenade that I just threw into your lap.
No, but I am curious about what are the plans of everybody. So now I am going to look into it. I will say that, and I'll come back with some answers.
That's what I want to hear. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with Scott Dworkin. Scott is the co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, also the host of the fabulous Dworkin Report. Make sure you check that out wherever you get your favorite podcast. So while you're downloading our podcast, get the Dworkin report as well. I do want to go back to the big announcement and the media fawning all over this. It seems like, no matter what Trump does, they still cover him the same in this fawning kind of non-critical kind of way. And this, almost, I don't know. It just seems kind of, I don't know. I was making butt kissing noises last night. It seems a lot like that.
It really is fascinating in a terrible way to see how desperate anyone is for ratings and how they consider an announcement to be of any kind by him to be newsworthy at the level where they need to cover it like it's the biggest breaking news ever in the history of the world, when everybody knows the answer. And then they learn nothing, as we see, and there's no change in the demeanor, and all of a sudden his cronies are back out again giving commentary and a two sides thing to democracy versus not, and trying to cover up the crimes that he's already committed. This is not something that should be taken seriously, and we need to, besides the fact that we need to make sure that we don't cover him this way. He doesn't need to be covered live. He doesn't need to have an entire news crew there. They don't need to feed the flames. They don't need to be there. You'll be able to see it through one of the right-wing media networks, and then you can tweak the links or something along those lines. Like, we need to abandon him. That is one of the key components. Is if the media abandons him, he's got nothing left.
But doesn't that feed into the narrative that the mainstream media is making? They're basically creating him as a martyr and playing into that victim frame. Then
it seems like they're doing that. Like
they're going to do it anyway.
They're going to be framed in whatever way he sets up anyway. So screw him. Like, just move on from him. Yeah, salacious. Yeah, he's going to say some crazy stuff. And yeah, there's going to be things that you think are newsworthy that you make newsworthy, but instead maybe just cover something that, a Biden speech, cover something about a meeting between health professionals, like do something that might be boring.
Something like today was the 1-year anniversary of signing the infrastructure bill.
Yeah,
and the thousands of projects that are going to get done, and the bridges that are going to fix that aren't going to collapse, and the roads that are going to get paved so I don't have to get my front end aligned every 6 months, and all of the broadband access that's going to happen in rural communities across this country because of this investment. Maybe report on something, I don't know, like that.
Exactly. And if they report on it like you just talked about it right there, then it is something that's provocative. It is something that is worth coverage. It is something where they can see. You don't have to talk about it in a monotone voice. You don't have to talk about the fact that he's kicking and crushing it. President Biden is crushing it. I'm going to get some tweets and emails about that one. But literally, he is making a difference. You can see across the country the road work that's already being done.
I know.
The things that have been accomplished. The bridges have been built. Like, you can see it firsthand, and you can see the jobs that have been created. You can see the money flowing to states, and you can see all the accomplishments from it. And I remember when we started our ad kickoff for the beginning of the infrastructure bill, and people were like, at first they were like, well, this isn't going to. And our first ad was about fixing the drinking water. And people did not know how bad the drinking water was across this country.
Yeah.
And so these are simple fixes that everyone should be on board with, and it is a bipartisan infrastructure bill, but most of it was run by Democrats. And this was ushered through by President Biden's administration. And they should be applauded for it because it is amazing work. It's enormous, and it will, as he said, it's not infrastructure week, it's infrastructure decades.
Yeah. No, I keep saying that they need to get big giant. Joe Biden did. In fact, take those stickers that they were slapping on gas pumps and make big 15-foot signs, pointing at the construction. Because I did this the other day. It was a couple of weeks ago. I was waiting in a construction zone, and there was a guy with a hard hat, and I go, "That damn Joe Biden." He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Yeah, I got you a job building this road, so I have to wait in traffic." And he didn't know what to say.
It's tough. It's sometimes to overcome objections, because I've talked to some people across the country that have complained about the traffic because of the construction that's ongoing. And I'm like, well, you're going to drive around in those potholes? What are you going to do? Well, we could actually take that road. And I'm like, well, so you're saying that there's traffic because there's construction on a road that you couldn't take before, but now one of the lanes is operational, so you're complaining about that? You can't win with some people. They're going to nitpick something. And it's like, yeah, Joe Biden's infrastructure bill is really hurting us with the traffic. And
gas prices are too high. Joe Biden flipped the switch in the Oval Office.
Gas prices would be higher. Gas prices, if we were relative to Britain, if we were relative to anywhere overseas, like gas prices would be a lot higher. If you didn't have, and it's also not controlled entirely by him. If you look at the profits of the oil and gas industry and the executives doing all the criminal gouging at the pumps, those are the people that need to be held accountable. It should be criminal what they're doing. But it should be criminal. They should be arrested for it. This is not okay. They are raking in profits while we are sitting there trying to afford gas for our cars because they are exploiting the crisis that they've made in the first place.
But had Joe Biden just built the pipeline, the XL pipeline, we wouldn't have any of these. Gas would be 80 cents a gallon.
Gas wouldn't have been flowing through there because it wouldn't have been even updated by this point. It wouldn't.
Stop with your facts. The narrative is let the dirty tar sands oil go through the U.S. out to wherever they refine it over its seas, and it would be 80 cents a gallon here. Get with the narrative.
Yes, those are not facts. Those are a fact sheet presented by Donald Trump, I would assume.
No, I had someone tell me that recently. I had someone tell me that the reason that gas is so high is because they canceled, that they stopped the pipeline. I go, no, the Keystone Pipeline is operating just fine. It's pumping, millions of gallons through. Absolutely, it's still working. It's taking oil from right down the middle of the country. It is. It's working. Well, he stopped. I go, no, he stopped the little offshoot of it.
Yeah,
for the dirty stuff. And that's what he stopped. Yeah, and it was never going to help us. It was never for us. It was leaving the country. Understand that. And this is where he hit me with I did my own research.
Yeah.
And that's when I knew.
Did.
He was watching a YouTube video. He was watching a YouTube video with his pants around his ankles on the can. That's it.
That'll do it. I've heard so many times folks say that, I heard this news, I can't believe it. And I'm like, well, where'd you see it? On Facebook. And I'm like, where on Facebook? Like CBS news feed? Like where on Facebook? Well, my friend's feed, and
Joe's
it's
Garage.
In one of those text boxes where it's like a nice, neat kind of thing. And I'm like, no, that's their opinion. They can write whatever they want.
It looked official.
That may not be a fact. Yeah. Like that's not real news. That's someone's opinion, because Joe Biden is not what they say. He is not a leprechaun, and he does not exist to hand out gold to people. Oh, well, I believe Facebook. It's my Facebook feed, and they can't overcome it.
Yeah, because that's their research. And this is the important part about, I think the country needs to find a dictionary and look up what actual research is. Because doing your research is not reading a Facebook meme or watching the YouTube video on the can. That is not research. That's just reading something on a social media app. Research is actually intensive, hard digging and looking for sources and all kinds of testing of theory. And there's a whole bunch that goes into actual research. Ask an actual researcher. They might tell you.
And what you just said takes too much time, and I don't know. I don't know if that's people have the time to do that. And it's like talking. I drifted off there because I'm sorry. I do things in 20-second batches where I only watch short videos on TikTok of people dancing to that chicken buck with an egg and cracking them from the top or whatever.
I have not seen that. I don't have TikTok.
Cracking challenge.
I don't do TikTok. The China thing scares me.
Oh, that is an interesting market. Obviously with Elon, his acquisition of Twitter. A lot of people are spreading their wings to different venues. I've been, working on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I will not be, and YouTube. I'm not spreading from there, and that's enough for me. On top of Twitter, And there's so many social media networks. I wish there was just one hub where you could post one thing and it'd go to all the different social
Isn't
media
that what
networks.
Hootsuite is? Or Hootsuite or whatever it is?
You see, that is, I've been told that any third parties that do exist like that are a security risk that people can potentially hack in your account. Not saying that it'd be you, Hootsuite, so don't need to email me
Don't sue him.
that.
But there you go. Good stuff. I not only almost got you sued, but I'm sure the DNC is going to be calling in the morning to straighten you out.
The conference go. Oh well, I'm not going to say if those calls ever happen, but I will say that that never goes well for the other end. I don't take kindly to calls like that because I'm not controlled by anyone.
Good stuff, Scott. Appreciate the time as always. Amazing stuff. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks for getting me in trouble. Appreciate it.
You're always welcome. Our good friend Scott Dworkin. Make sure you check out the podcast, The Dworkin Report, wherever you get your favorite podcast. You will find that. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Come to talk. Tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. Yes, research. If there's one word during the pandemic that I'm really tired of is research. I'm doing my own research. Yeah. Look, as somebody who has actually done research, it's hard work. Look, I don't like. I didn't like it. When we were when I was taking a master's course and. Wow. The volumes of source material and all the stuff and citing those sources. This is the part of research that you also need. I have people who tell me I did my research, and I always ask, well, give me your reading list. What is it? What are your sources? Where did you get this pearl of wisdom? Where did you find this nugget of knowledge? Where did it come from? And invariably, as Scott said, it is, somebody wrote something on Facebook. And it's amazing that we take this stuff at face value. Or I saw it on YouTube and the guy he said he was a doctor. And you go, oh, okay, all right. Did you find anything else to corroborate that? Was there, source material that he gave? No. Oh, yeah, he did. He wrote a book. Oh, yeah, he wrote a book. And he wants you to buy that book, right? It's quite remarkable how this game all kind of plays itself out. And sadly, and this, I guess, is our fault as a society when we're not talking about what actual research is. And this is where the smart people should have stepped forward going, no, doofus. Research is this. This is the word. This is what you need to be doing. You need to be checking your sources. And not Joe in his garage, but actual sources, reliable sources, sources that other people go, oh yeah, that's a reliable source. As I teach the kids, you've got to filter. The important skill of this generation going forward is taking, information and filtering it through, evaluating it, and discarding the garbage. The sad reality is the garbage is what's being grabbed onto. The garbage is because it's affirming our bias. We want to believe all the craziness. We want to believe there's a conspiracy around every corner. So any nut job who comes up with a conspiracy theory, I saw it on YouTube, and they're doing it. Oh, help us. And it starts with you. You've got to stand up, speak out, and push this stuff down. I appreciate you tuning in. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find ours.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.